Welcome back to another week's installment of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, coming at you solo for this jam-packed edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. We're going to get to the preview of the HIAC pay-per-view momentarily, in which we'll have the predictions. I'll make my predictions as well as go over the predictions that Justin Lowry has passed along. But before we get into that, we're going to discuss the programming on television this week in the WWE with a combination of the Raw recap and the SmackDown summary. And right off the bat, before I jump into any specifics, it just felt like a very disappointing week leading up to this pay-per-view. There's not a lot of anticipation, and quite frankly, I think that the company overall is sort of putting more time and effort into promoting some of the upcoming shows, which would be the Super Show that takes place in Melbourne, Australia in early October, and then the first ever all-women's pay-per-view Evolution that takes place at the end of October. It seems like really the bigger storylines are being built towards that show and making this upcoming weekend's event sort of an afterthought. And I think that played out this week on television. There was not a lot of development and really not a lot of urgency, in my estimation, for the build for some of these matches. And additionally, it is a light card. We'll get to that as we break down each match, but there's only, as of now, Friday afternoon, 8 total matches set. So you have to figure that they're going to probably add at least 1 or 2 more, at least just to fill out the pre-show. But that is a light card considering the fact that it's now every pay-per-view is dual branded, and they've also gone to the longer format with the earlier start time. So it just seems like the effort hasn't been there to make this pay-per-view feel significant, and I think that certainly played out on Monday night. One, I would say, last-minute change, or more specifically, addition to one of the big matches at HIAC came in a very surprising manner on Monday night, as later in the show, Elias was in the ring, and he's at this point barely even wrestling on television. They're kind of saving him to facilitate other storylines. We've seen him work with both Trish Stratus and Alexa Bliss in recent weeks, sort of putting over that match at Evolution, by the way, to my point that they're sort of building already with Alexa and Trish before she's even done with Ronda Rousey. Nonetheless, they use Elias in the same way this past Monday, as he's in the ring, and all of a sudden he gets interrupted, but not by a current superstar, not by really a superstar at all. It's a legend, if you will, in Mick Foley, as Foley comes out, interrupts Elias. They kind of go back and forth, and Elias used some real-life storytelling here, in which he talked about being at the cell match that Mick Foley was thrown off the top through the announce table by The Undertaker. That, of course, taking place at King of the Ring 1998 in Pittsburgh, Elias' hometown. So they used that, but, while it was a decent exchange, the big takeaway from this was the fact that ultimately Mick Foley announced that he would be involved in this Sunday's version of the cell match between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, and he will be the referee. Now, why would he announce this to Elias and not to Roman and Braun Strowman? A little confusing there. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Why Mick Foley's involved at all? My opinion is they just needed something to kind of spark a little bit of interest. To me, this is probably not going to work. For the more recent fans, this isn't going to mean much. Mick Foley was a kind of a failure as GM, not just in storyline purposes, but I don't think he came across very good in that role. I do think he was much better with his promo on Monday, in which he talked about some of the pain and anguish that he suffered in that match and sort of promoting it in that sense, as far as what it can do to a wrestler's psyche and their long-term health for their career. But, this is a guy that's been retired for, nearly 20 years, and I just don't think it adds too much to this match. It doesn't make a lot of sense to throw him in there. He hasn't been on TV whatsoever. I don't know if they're trying to get, maybe a few last-minute eyes on this match, but to me, it's sort of a desperate attempt, and it comes off as such. So Mick Foley involved, and then ultimately he kind of played up the fact that he was, I guess, the celeb GM for the night, with Kurt Angle on sabbatical. Baron Corbin was in charge, but he was sort of busy elsewhere. So Foley actually made a match between Finn Balor and Elias, sort of as punishment for Elias insulting him. Nonetheless, the big takeaway again, Foley will be in the cell on Sunday's pay-per-view. And as I mentioned, the match that he will be involved with really was the biggest, I guess, highlight from Monday Night Raw. That was the Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns feud. Now, what they're doing with this feud is there's a lot going on here, because they first had this as a face versus face type of feud in which the fans clearly were going to side with Braun Strowman over Roman Reigns. There was no surprise that after Roman became champion, Braun tried to cash in on him. People wanted to see Braun win that, take the title right off of Roman immediately. Didn't happen at SummerSlam, didn't happen the following night because the Shield intervened. So what do? They take arguably their most popular face on Monday Night Raw and Braun Strowman, turn him heel, so that the fans are more so forced to side with Roman Reigns and in particular with the Shield. So they're sort of playing up the Roman-Braun storyline, adding the new wrinkle of Braun being the heel, and then they're also adding in Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler on Braun's side to sort of even the odds and also make him a little bit more hated, as he's paired with two guys that really don't get much of a face reaction whatsoever. Well, what happens on Monday is they start with the two groups going at it, and then everyone's kind of separated. Ultimately, it turns out that the final segment is, the brawl that you would expect, the physical encounter between Roman and Braun Strowman. To me, it came off as sort of weak, anticlimactic. I just didn't think that the big sequence of Roman giving a Samoan drop to Braun off of the announcer's table was enough for me. I was left wanting to see something a little bit more to build up the match. But I think it's going to be a big match because it's for the Universal title. They're trying to give meaning back to that title by having it defended more than once every 3 or 4 months. Braun has a legitimate opportunity to be champion. I think people expected that at some point in 2018 he would be a world champion, specifically a Universal champion. But, I don't know. This feud, to me, it just seems like it's sort of a jumbled mess. You're trying to turn Strowman heel. You're getting other people involved in it, so it's basically a 3-on-3 storyline, but you're still trying to boil it down to this one-on-one match for the title. You put it inside a cell. You throw Mick Foley in. Too much going on, in my opinion, and they didn't really boil it down into one specific clear-cut storyline that made sense by the end of Monday. So, to me, I did not like the finish to Raw with Roman and Braun with the brawl, and then ultimately Roman getting the upper hand. We'll see what happens on Sunday. You would hope it's a good match. I don't want to see Mick Foley really factor in, but, that being said, I think he probably will to some degree, trying to keep out maybe Dolph and Drew, and then we'll see if the other members of the Shield intervene. Nonetheless, that was what they really spent their time focusing on Monday, was the addition of Mick Foley to the match, and then ultimately the Roman Braun, as well as the Dolph and Drew versus Seth and Dean, which also was made as a tag team title match upcoming for the pay-per-view on Sunday. The other takeaway that I thought was somewhat interesting on Monday Night Raw was the promo cut by Kevin Owens. And for those who maybe are a few weeks behind, have been missing some programming on Raw, Kevin Owens a few weeks ago lost a match against Seth Rollins. It was a great, great match. Afterwards, he announced he quit. And he gave no explanation, just walked out. So there became some legitimate interest in what might happen with Kevin Owens. That interest sort of subsided the next week when he just returned. He was did not even miss a single episode. And he came back attacking Bobby Lashley. Now, how that makes sense, yeah, that's a good question. He kind of spun it to blame Lashley for injuring Sami Zayn, which happened, over the summer. But how that relates to Kevin Owens now, you have to try to really stretch to make that connection. Nonetheless, Owens is back. This week they showed his vicious side as he attacked and brutally beat Tyler Breeze, who unfortunately is, that's basically his position now, to put someone else over. Breeze did that with Owens, and then Owens cut a promo in which he said he was hired back with basically carte blanche. He can do whatever he wants without ramifications. So he could go around beating up whoever he wants. He can attack people brutally, and nothing's going to happen to him. Now, what this ultimately leads to, we'll have to wait and see. It does sort of make Kevin Owens a little bit unique as compared to the rest of the roster. But again, if it's leading towards him and Lashley, which we're certainly probably not going to get that this Sunday unless they throw it as a pre-show match, which I don't think they would, hastily put that on a pre-show. I don't know what this is ultimately going to mean for Kevin Owens. Yeah, he's now, potentially has the option to be more vicious, to be really a great heel, can come out whenever he wants, can, beat down people. Nothing will happen to him. But we'll see how long they play this up, this, little aspect of this storyline. Ultimately, I think that the biggest factor in whether he's going to succeed or fail is, will he get good storylines and will he win matches? Because he was absolutely dominated by Braun Strowman that entire storyline. Owens was putting over Strowman only for Strowman to turn heel the next night. It seems very short-sighted. Didn't really do Strowman any favors. Certainly didn't help Owens whatsoever. So I'd like to see him better used where he's going to win matches and win feuds. I don't want to see the cowardly Kevin Owens. I want to see a vicious Kevin Owens reminiscent of what we saw in NXT. Maybe this addition to the storyline with this new clause could potentially be a sign that they're heading back in that direction. Other than that, I didn't think there was a lot that came out of Raw. I saw some people, including my colleague Justin Lowry, saying basically it was a repeat of the prior week's show. You didn't get a lot more in terms of development. One thing that I thought was unusual, and this will sort of transition to SmackDown as well, as we're going to jump into the SmackDown summary. I thought it was very strange to see 2 or 3 times on Monday Night Raw they had video packages promoting SmackDown matches for the HIAC pay-per-view. And you haven't really seen that too much, since the brand split. And yes, they have the joint pay-per-views, the co-branded events. But typically they focus on promoting their own storylines and matches. So Raw will focus on all the Raw stuff. SmackDown will handle all the SmackDown stuff. And you really don't see them mixed and matched very often. To me, it just kind of shows that they don't have a lot going on right now. They didn't have enough storylines and matches upcoming for Raw to promote. I think Raw maybe only has 4 matches for HIAC, so they had to spend some time on Monday trying to build up the SmackDown matches, and then they did basically the complete opposite on Tuesday. The reversal of that by having some of the Raw matches promoted on SmackDown. So it just, this just feels like an event where they didn't put enough time into properly building, and they don't have enough matches. While I think 8 matches is fine for a pay-per-view, when you consider that these are typically going 3.5 to 4 hours, and really a lot of these matches probably shouldn't be 30-minute encounters, I just don't know that they have enough right now. And again, that goes back to just poor preparation and really treating this as a secondary pay-per-view, to say the least. Speaking of SmackDown and the job that the Blue Brand did, I thought that much like Raw, the show came up flat. I thought SmackDown has been the better show in recent weeks, but this week I didn't really like the go-home offering that SmackDown presented, and one of the biggest turnoffs to me was the main event. It was Brie Bella against Maryse, and while they needed to continue to promote the mixed match between Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella with The Miz and Maryse on the opposite side, when you say the main event of SmackDown on the go-home show is Brie Bella, who's been, I would say, a borderline disaster since she's returned to the ring. I mean, she had just one of those weeks that were historically bad last week, where she was botching her dives on Raw. and then she just absolutely crushed Zelina Vega to the point where, I think a lot of people were wondering, was Vega legitimately injured on SmackDown? So now, after that, she gets elevated to the main event against Maryse, who, while she looks great and I'm sure is in great shape just 5 months after giving birth, neither one of these women in their prime were even above average, and truthfully, I think saying even average in-ring competitors might be a stretch. Now probably they're below that, being away from the ring, and really, for at least women's wrestlers, being past the age where you typically see women at their best. So they come out and have a main event, which, casual fan, maybe if you're a fan of Total Bellas, Total Divas, or Ms. and Mrs., you might be interested in this. But if you're a wrestling fan, this is not a main event that you were hoping to see. I really don't like the fact that these women are specifically involved in the match with Daniel Bryan and The Miz. To me, it really brings down the possible quality of that match on Sunday. But, that's the direction they're going. They're adding the wives to the feud. So they have the match on SmackDown. It really wasn't a match at all. I think it was, basically 2 or 3 minutes of Maryse running from Brie Bella, 2 or 3 minutes of an actual match, and then a DQ interruption where Miz and Daniel Bryan get involved. Ultimately, it led to Brie Bella punching Miz in the face, and Bryan and Bella having really the upper hand heading into the event. But, with so much great in-ring talent, both on the men's and the women's side, in addition to the tag team division, SmackDown Live does not really need to lower itself to a Brie Bella and Maryse main event, in my estimation. Speaking, however, of the tag teams, there was a very notable tag team match on Tuesday night. This one was to determine who would challenge the New Day for the SmackDown tag team titles at the HIAC event. It was a battle between The Bar and Rusev Day, the team of Rusev and Aiden English. And while it probably wasn't as good as some of the tag team matches we've seen in recent weeks on SmackDown, you're always going to get a solid performance from The Bar. Cesaro and Sheamus are just darn good in the ring, and they usually deliver. And Rusev and Aiden English can hold their own. Rusev, I think, in particular, is above average as far as a competitor. So, at least in my estimation, not surprised that we got Rusev and Aiden English scoring the victory. You see the acolyte here is actually a Rusev's Machka kick that scored the victory. And what this is basically doing is filling a void by putting a tag team title match together. But the bigger storyline and the ultimate takeaway from this is going to be the continuation of the hot and cold relationship between Rusev and Aiden English, as they teased that breakup going back to July with Extreme Rules, and they sort of went away from it where these two have mended fences, and they've been on the same page the last couple weeks. But it always seems like Aiden English is doing the right thing to try to win over Rusev. He got them in this tag team tournament bracket to begin with, and then this past week against Sheamus and Cesaro, Aiden English sort of took the bullet for Rusev, and that allowed Rusev just seconds later to get the victory, as he was unfazed by, I believe it was a bro kick from Sheamus. So this is going to, I believe, lead to Rusev and Aiden English going at it sooner rather than later, and I think the blow-up could come this Sunday. But so that's why they're going forward with this storyline, is to bring a fresh team to the landscape to challenge the New Day, because we've already seen the Usos go against them many, many times. We've seen The Bar pretty recently go against the New Day. I don't think the Colognes are at a level where people are going to care. Anderson and Gallows, really not at that caliber on a regular basis either. And then the Bludgeon Brothers, of course, with Eric Rowan injured, they're sort of outside looking in. And Sanity, we've already seen them against the New Day recently, and right now it seems like that trio is on the back burner as well. So it makes sense to get a fresh face out there as the opponents. People care about Rusev. As a result, by association, they care about Aiden English. So there should be good crowd reaction to this match. That being said, it feels much more like a Rusev and Aiden English storyline than it does a storyline for the tag team titles. But at least you give them credit for, tying something in and giving you a fresh match that we really haven't seen time and time again. Another takeaway, and this is really a two-part one from SmackDown that I think is notable, was the continued build between Randy Orton and Jeff Hardy and what has been a tremendous storyline. A bit confusing with the way it's unfolded in terms of the matches and the sequence of that, but just a tremendous storyline. Very personal between two veterans who have been around so long that, yeah, a lot of fans probably get sick of seeing Randy Orton. Jeff Hardy's now in his 40s. He theoretically shouldn't be able to do the stuff that he did 15 years ago, but these guys have really stepped up their game, and I think that this is an under-the-radar, terrific feud. Maybe not feud of the year caliber, but one of the better feuds that we've seen in WWE in 2018, I would certainly say. Let's backtrack a little bit with how the night started. Jeff Hardy comes out, cuts one of his bizarre promos that he's been doing for a few weeks now on SmackDown, talking about Randy Orton, but also saying how he wants to get revenge first on Nakamura, who defeated him for the U.S. title and then knocked him off at SummerSlam. So they have Hardy and Nakamura go at it, and, while this was a perfectly good match, I think the guys did fine in this role. You kind of got the feeling right away that this was more about how Randy Orton would factor in. Would he get involved in the match prematurely? Do he come out afterwards? Sort of like he teased doing at SummerSlam, but never really followed through. So, we have a, 2-segment match between Nakamura and Jeff Hardy. Good action, I think, for those two guys. It's about what you would expect. Nakamura at this point sort of lost as far as storyline goes, so they just want to go out there and have him use his in-ring prowess and show off that ability and kind of lend importance to this match to kick off SmackDown, even though, he's not really in the midst of any challengers for his championship, and in all likelihood he will not be on the card this Sunday. But he and Orton had some good chemistry, and I thought it was a solid match, but there was no surprise how it ended. Randy Orton interrupts, pushes Jeff Hardy off the top rope, and then these two just unload on each other with chair shots, albeit not over the head. That is banned, but it was sort of reminiscent of, WWE maybe 15, 20 years ago, where there was some real violence between these two. They were just blasting each other with the chairs. You see Orton here over the back of Jeff Hardy, and then Hardy ultimately got the upper hand and really took it to Orton. So they are playing up the fact that these two will be confined inside the cell. That is a SmackDown match that will take place inside the cell for the HIAC event this Sunday. And, the real underlying factor in this is it is the first ever cell match for Jeff Hardy. Hard to believe with all the cage matches, all the ladder matches, all the other stipulation matches he's been a part of. This is one that he really wanted, so he gets his wish. And it is sort of fitting because this has become a very, very personal feud, although I think you could say a lot of the SmackDown feuds have that personal feel to it. Samoa Joe, AJ Styles certainly does, as well as The Miz and Daniel Bryan mixing in the wives as well. But, this one, I understand that they want to give Jeff Hardy that opportunity. I'm sure he's very much excited. Now, you hope he doesn't do something that's going to really potentially put his body at risk, although knowing Jeff Hardy, he certainly will. I wouldn't be surprised for him to kind of steal the show with at least the highest spot of the night. Might not be the best match of the night, but I think Jeff Hardy's going to do something, whether he connects or not, that we're all going to remember. And it'll be a moment that in all likelihood we'll hold our breath for. But, Randy Orton, Jeff Hardy, they put a nice little finishing touch on the build to this match with these two going at it. And again, this is something that I think SmackDown has done a much better job of than Monday Night Raw. While I said I didn't really particularly enjoy SmackDown and the main event kind of turned things sour, I did think that there was some real development in terms of the Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, as well as the Randy Orton and Jeff Hardy feuds. Yes, they have been personal. They've been very well done to this point, and just a nice little touch on the end with Samoa Joe reading a story to AJ Styles, AJ cutting a promo, very personal and from the heart before the show even kicked off. So they did their job building up that WWE title match, and then Randy Orton and Jeff Hardy did the same with their very physical exchange in the ring. That's going to do it, though, for the Raw recap and the SmackDown summary. Again, not the best week of television for the go-home shows, but there's still a good chance that this show can deliver if the competitors go out there and put on a good performance. That being said, I think the anticipation level heading into this event, it's low, and it might be at one of the lowest in terms of all of the shows that the main roster has produced here in 2018. But we will have match-by-match predictions upcoming next as we have the preview for HIAC. For now, that's going to do it. Reminder to follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle. You can also like our YouTube channel. Check out all the videos dating back 25 plus weeks from when we started back in March. But for now, signing off of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, your host Sean Meyers. Stick around for the HIAC preview that's upcoming next right here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.